3. Good morning, Terp fans. This is the TerpTalk Homecoming Game Day edition. Yes, I have my black TerpTalk shirt on too. It's Bruce. It's the Wizard Mason. We're going to start off today, talk a few minutes about, and a very few minutes, about what happened at Iowa last week. And I'm sure a lot of you have seen the Todd Carton trip report. He went to Iowa. That's up on TerpTalk.com and on Capital Sports Blog. Terps go down 31-15. It was a really rough start. And then in the second half, things started to go Maryland's way a little bit. Any particular impressions of playing undefeated top 10 Iowa?
They were undefeated and they were top 10. They played like it. And my big takeaway, of course, was when the game really ended, when Desmond King picked six, the tunnel screen that Perry Hills threw. Yeah,
that was, I thought we were getting back in the game at that point. Bruce, you always say you're not as good as you look when you're winning. You're not as bad as you look when you're losing. But I'll tell you, Iowa looks extremely competent. Does that play into you're not as competent as you look when you're playing like Iowa does?
You got me way confused. All I can say, you are what your record says you are.
Yeah.
And that's how the Terps played. They're 2-6 now, is that correct?
Yeah.
And they played like a 2-6 team. You can't consistently have 5 turnovers a game and expect to ever win. And that's the bottom line. Had they had 0 turnovers, who knows what would have happened? But the offense wasn't there. When you looked at Iowa and you looked at Maryland, it reminded me of last year. You and me were sitting together with Mason, of course. And when Iowa came out of the field, we said, we look like midgets.
Yes.
Remember that?
Yeah.
Well, last week when Iowa came out on the field, they just, and after watching a few minutes, it was just clear we were outmanned.
We were outmanned, but we managed to somehow stay in the game for a little bit, and the turnovers killed us.
21-0 at halftime.
Yeah.
It was never a game.
No.
We weren't in it. The running game wasn't really working. The passing game was invisible.
Somewhere between invisible and embarrassing. The only thing we've got going at the running game at the moment, Ross has some carries, but he has some fumbles. Hills is a really good running back, but he has to be able to throw the ball a little bit.
Mason made a point. He said he thought the game was over when he threw the pick six.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I thought the game was over when Ross fumbled. We were driving down the field. There was no score.
Mm-hmm.
The fumble was out of nowhere. Before you know it, boom, it's 7-0.
Yeah.
And we were done.
We were done. So a similar game, although probably a little worse, was the last time. The last time Maryland played Wisconsin, which was in October.
That was the worst. I think that was one of the worst games in Maryland's history, maybe second to the Virginia Tech game. Down there when they got slaughtered.
Then that Florida State game was.
Man, there was a Penn State game.
Okay.
You're right.
There's a couple.
It was pretty bad.
For all the years that Wisconsin's played football, Maryland's played. Last year was the first time. This will be the second time we meet. The game is actually at 3:42 Eastern time on Big Ten Network.
I have a question to ask you. Why do I look like Andre the Giant here?
I'm not sure, but you do.
Is that weird? You look like you're a midget.
Maybe my chair's too low. I've lost weight. I look
like Andre the Giant. All right, go ahead.
Paul Chryst, the new coach.
What a job. What a great job.
Yeah, they're 7-2. The only losses they came on opening night against Alabama. The Iowa game, 10-6. Did anybody see anything on that game other than highlights?
Great defense by Iowa. Stop the run.
These are both great defenses.
But I think that our problem is, did I look, Mason? I'm sure you got the numbers. 74 yards a game they've given up on the run, or was that Iowa?
I think was that Iowa. Who gave up 85 total yards in the fourth quarter on the ground.
Yeah, I think it is 74 yards a game.
Yeah.
That Wisconsin gives up.
So
Wisconsin, 95.7 a game.
Wisconsin, who was 7-2, just the 2 losses. They're not ranked. They're ranked 26th. The schedule, as you said, Maryland has one heck of a tough schedule in the Big Ten. Iowa's schedule, not so much. It's 7-2. They have Maryland. They get Northwestern at home. They're on the road at Minnesota. Northwestern seems to be on the downside. Play Penn State today. Minnesota, their head coach had to retire for medical reasons. They're not what they seem to be either. You could be looking at
something's wrong. Something's wrong with this unbalanced schedule because you have the 3 best teams in the conference in the same division.
Right.
You got Michigan, Michigan State, and Ohio State.
Right.
Wisconsin didn't play any of them this year.
Nope.
And I don't know
And
how
we
you
sort of saw
resolve that.
with the Iowa schedule.
Right. I don't know how you resolve that. Okay. I really don't. But something's wrong there. All right. And
Right.
now with Penn State coming back, you're going to have maybe 4 of the top 5 teams in the
Right.
same division.
And then Wisconsin probably leads on the other side with Iowa. But the rest of the schedule, their Big Ten games are Iowa, Nebraska, Purdue, Illinois, Rutgers, Terps, Northwestern, Minnesota. Our Big Ten schedule still looks like the Hall of Fame. Theirs not so much.
And we draw Iowa and Wisconsin cross conference.
Right. So that's just the way it is. You got to win the games that you play.
Yeah, it's no criticism.
No, Wisconsin this year, checking the clock, we're almost up for the Wizard, but Wisconsin this year has one guy, Tanner McAvoy, that you might remember played quarterback when Wisconsin was on TV a lot a few years ago. He now also plays safety. He plays wide receiver. I believe an interception, a sack recently. The guy plays all over the field. Joel Stave moving up the career starts list, career receptions, completions, yardage, the whole thing. Has been one of the best quarterbacks statistically ever at Wisconsin. They have this wide receiver, Alex Erickson, who's starting to come on at running back. Who was their bell cow who's back this week?
Yeah, they had Corey Clement going into the season. We saw a lot of him last year when they had Melvin Gordon. And this year he was supposed to be like the next Melvin Gordon. And he gets hurt, I believe, 2 or 3 weeks into the season, and Maryland's his coming back game.
Well, he'll be back. They have a great pair of tackles for lost sacks guys in Schubert and Beagle. Let's go ahead and put that Wizard hat on because I don't want to steal any numbers from you. But what's the number 11 mean today?
Well, Wisconsin ranks first in points per game. This is the second team coming in that Maryland's played ranked first.
And the first is 11 points a game?
Yeah, and then we have Michigan at 11.4 that Maryland got blanked by.
Yeah.
Maryland,
Defensively.
Yeah. Wow.
Maryland has played 3 of the top 4 teams, and will make it 4 of 4 today.
Wow.
Ranking in numbers by Michigan, Ohio State, Iowa, and Maryland on average scored 14.3 points per game against those 3 teams.
Yeah.
And Maryland gives up 28 points per game, and Wisconsin scores 28 points per game. So by the numbers, the score should be 28-14.
12.5-point difference in the spread today.
Yeah.
To be a 12.5-point dog at home is very unusual.
Yeah.
But Maryland fits that role.
They do.
I want to bring this up. We heard yesterday that perhaps Baltimore head coach John Harbaugh is exploring opportunities.
Yeah.
All right. And there's a dream. I don't want to see him leave the Ravens at all. But if he's going to leave, I don't want to see him go to USC. But that looks like where it would be.
What
What would be your take on where he would go?
Wow, USC would be that's funny. They sort of swap areas of the country, the 2 Harbaugh brothers, one going west, one coming a little closer east. That seems like a good fit.
USC seems to be a place you could go to and win right away.
Yeah, and they're still the number 1 team in Los Angeles right now. I don't have anything further on the Maryland coaching thing. A name that popped up this week is E.J. Withers, who was a coordinator at Ohio State. He's now the head coach at JMU. He seems to be inching onto the bottom of the list, but the top of the list hasn't changed.
How about Bryles' son? What do you think of him? He's awful young.
Yeah.
All right. But look at that offense.
Does that offense work here?
Why not? In other words,
slide over this way a little
okay,
bit.
why wouldn't it work? Okay.
I'm not sure. The guy with the Wizard hat on here says if you really want to actually win something, those offenses historically fail at the end.
I don't know. You come in with a second string quarterback, and it's like there's not a drop off in that offense.
31-24. Yeah.
Yeah, there was, because they were scoring 63 points per game before that.
Yeah, but it was his first game. Okay,
Right.
You got to give him a break. It was his first game. They were on the road. And did you watch the game?
Yeah.
How many drops were there? It was unbelievable how many drops there were. There had to be 7 or 8 drops by Baylor. Now, is that because he's throwing it harder or softer? I don't know.
It's just different.
But he was on the money.
I know we've suffered greatly from drop passes. So I want to take a minute to talk about Loxley, who he's opened up in the press conferences lately.
Great guy. He really is. Now that you get to hear him and whatever, you can understand why he's like a magnet.
Yeah, you can. I mean, he starts talking and you're like, wow, if Maryland wins a couple of games, he actually seems to be a legitimate contender.
Well, I thought the day he was named interim coach, he was a legitimate contender. And the other thing that's a little bothersome is you have 8 college openings right now.
Mm-hmm.
And it's November the what, 7th?
7th.
There's going to be 20 openings.
Yeah.
You know, there could be a log jam trying to get these guys. Herman already, the word is he's not coming to Maryland. All right. So the Toledo, I mean, you got this Toledo guy, Campbell, is
like the number 1 guy on 5 lists.
It's ridiculous, you know?
Right. Miami job, people said it's a little above or a little below where Maryland is, but I think they're going to take a Miami guy. It's the question to me is how many teams that you would say is a better job than Maryland are going to open up? If teams that are below where you see Maryland's status open up, that's one thing. And the other part is how much money is Maryland really going to pay to bring in a head coach? But back to the actual Loxley coaching part, he brought up that one of the reasons that he changed the rotation and plays almost everybody who has a decent week in practice, gets 15, 16 plays a game, is he wanted to break up the idea that it would have been different if I played. So he says it makes everybody much more accountable if no matter where you sit on the depth chart, you're getting in that game if you can play.
I love that
brings
theory.
A group.
Unless it causes defeat.
He said at this point, the way they're playing, if you think that putting in Darnell Savage, who's a freshman, wears number 26 at cornerback, is going to lose the game for us, it's got to be on Darnell to play well enough.
Right.
You're bringing accountability into that. And I think you're going to see a little more Darnell Savage in place of Sean Davis. Is it Jarrett Ross?
Yeah, Jarrett Ross has taken a backup safety job to Anthony Nixon, I believe.
Right. So who is the actual backup for Davis?
For Sean Davis, the backup is Josh Woods.
Okay. He had played some corner and safety. And Loxley said, look, it's like raising kids. Sometimes they don't do the smartest thing, but you got to love them and you train them and eventually they're going to get it. And you just need a lot of patience to bring this up to where it needs to be. And from listening to him last week, Tuesday, earlier this week, it was the first time I actually saw the real Mike Loxley. He was a little more closed off. But when I talked to Dustin, who's the SID for football, he said, no, that's the Mike Loxley that everybody sees, is the guy that was at the press conference on Tuesday. So I really like that.
Question. All right. How big, you guys follow this much closer than I do because he's in your area. How big is this commitment from Trayvon Diggs today? It really speaks volumes about Loxley, to tell you the truth.
You are closer to the situation than even I am. Is it a big get for Maryland?
Definitely Trayvon Diggs, a lot different playing style than Stephon. Just looks a lot bigger, plays a lot more physical wide receiver and quarterback. And it would just be a huge get because of his defensive ability and then his just overall speed.
But he doesn't want to play defense. Edsel offered him as a cornerback, you know this, and he wanted to play wide receiver. Now Loxley comes in, which I think is a really smart move, and says, all right, get your shot at wide receiver. You think?
I wonder why Edsel would do that. In other words, if the guy is an A as a cornerback and a B as a wide receiver, but we don't have any Bs, all right, and wants to play wide receiver, what do you think was in Edsel's mindset? Does he think he's a bad receiver? It can't be.
I don't know. I think
the video I've seen, he looks phenomenal.
Well, Avalon, not the biggest school. He went to Avalon because it's Spinner's the coach who had him at Wooten.
Yeah.
And then Spinner left Wooten and went to Avalon.
Yeah.
And Trayvon goes with him. I think it's because Edsel's one of these law and order guys, and in his honest opinion,
right,
the kid's going to be a cornerback, and he'd just rather say, you're a cornerback, and I'm going to recruit you as a cornerback, and that's what I think is best for you. And what Loxley's saying is, look, we'll give him a chance. If he ends up Kids change, kids develop. It's, as he said, it's like raising kids. You don't know exactly what you're going to get when you start. I think it's a good move.
Well, it's a tremendous get. The mere fact he's coming to Maryland when everybody else has looked at him means he really wants to come. It sounds like Haskins might be involved.
Of course.
And Haskins' stock is rising and rising and rising, kind of like Walt Williams, all right, in basketball.
That's a good analogy.
Right. And Haskins is going to be a Maryland legend if he turns this team around.
If he turns the team around, he's the best. It's Loxley, and then Haskins is the second best recruiter. But I've heard great things on the recruiting trail about Chad Wilt. I think we'll ask the Wizard to leave. We'll get Mason back in here. And the hat for Freddie. Thank you, Freddie, for saying the hat had to come back. On the offensive line, Derwin Gray, which is when Maryland started picking the game up against Iowa. You saw Derwin Gray come in at right tackle. He's huge. You saw Maurice Shelton at guard. These are really big guys.
Derwin Gray looked great.
Yeah,
he really did.
For those who don't follow everything, he wears number 75 for Maryland. He's going to get the start at right tackle. Damian Prince wore 58. He got hurt in the Penn State game, but he was doing well enough to stay on the field.
Too many illegal procedure calls.
Well, it goes back to the young part, but as far as when the ball was snapped, he was doing okay. I've heard Quarvez Bulware, who was Maryland's number one recruit on the offensive line.
Yeah, he's from around the D.C. area, one of the DMV to UMD recruits.
And I heard that if there were more injuries, he has moved up as a true freshman well enough that he could have played. And then there's the Ellis McKinney, and there's the E.J. Donahue and McLean, the offensive lineman McLean, who are making great strides. So there's 4 offensive linemen that Maryland's going to get to redshirt, plus Gray played and Prince has played. So finally I'm starting to see that future of the recruiting that we keep talking about starting to come along.
Well, 2-6. Need to win a game?
Well,
I don't know what else to say.
I'm looking for the bright spots.
We got the bright spot today because that bright spot, our chance to win the game, is a guy by the name of Joel Stave, all right? Yeah. The young man who beat out Danny O'Brien.
Right.
Who's now with the Ottawa Red Black.
That's right. We finally got that right.
Right.
Well, you had it Wednesday.
I had Red Black. I had Red Black.
Right.
What is Red Black?
Do you actually know what it is?
I have no idea.
It sounds like a Labatt's product. But
Yeah.
I'll move off of that. But just in case anybody forgot, DMV to UMD around 4 o'clock. We should hear the Trayvons of Terp to add to Tino Ellis, Lolo Harrison, of course, Haskins, Keandre Jones, one of the better linebackers out there, DJ Turner, the young man from DeMatha. Now you had Trayvon Diggs. Almost an instant offense coming in.
I've been pretty upset about football, as we all have been, because as you get up in age and you see a coaching change,
right,
you start thinking 3-4 years, 5 years before we're back.
Mm-hmm.
And in 5 years, I don't even want to think about that long.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Are these guys good enough to push us forward quicker with the proper coaching? Or are we just dreaming?
I don't.
It's hard to judge a guy who hasn't played a minute on the field yet.
It's true.
All right.
I know we're dying to talk Maryland basketball because last night we saw a guy who was highly touted following another guy, Mello, who was highly touted. Diamond and Mello, and both of them showed up almost instantly. But I know we have the college whip coming up.
Let's go. We're almost out of time.
Well, I'm gonna take one. I actually want to bring up Navy and Memphis. My neighbor goes to the Navy home game, 6-1 at 8-0, number 13 Memphis. To think that Navy and Memphis is a big football game is a shocking thing to me. Memphis an 8-point favorite. I think Fuentes and Memphis probably going to take that one. Now I'll turn it over to the actual national games. What do you have?
Well, let's start with my 2 best bets, all right, and then I'll go to Mason. Michigan State over Nebraska, all right, only a 5.5-point favorite. That doesn't make much sense to me. And you always get scared when you hear that, like the Utah game.
Right.
We talked about it. It was a joke. I mean, these guys know what they're saying.
Right.
5.5, I like Michigan State. I don't see it. And Middle Tennessee State's 3 over Marshall. I can't believe it's that low. I like Middle Tennessee State. And I'll turn it over to Mason for his picks of the week.
Well, at 12 o'clock, I got a good one for you guys to watch up there. Northwestern, Penn State, the line comes in at even. Northwestern still ranked 21st. and I see it as Northwestern's going to come out on top in that one.
I like that too a lot.
Well, you got to give me your Clemson free shoes, Florida State pick.
I think Clemson, Deshaun Watson has got this one because, Everett Golston and Sean McGuire have been really competing for the Florida State quarterback job. I don't think Florida State's actually that good. I think Clemson's going to win that one.
Mason, you're 2-0 in your best bet. Who do you like today? I want one game.
Today, I like Duke, who has 7 points against North Carolina. To take the points, Duke will win probably.
What'd you guys think of the Duke play?
Yeah, that's my close here. Hey, sometimes that stuff happens. What I want to hear from you, I'm going to ask you again on the Sports Maven on 1300 CBS Sports Radio coming up in about 10 minutes.
Right.
Is I heard a lot of guys, even radio guys, saying, well, in that one case, the ACC or Miami should do something and say, hey, the guy actually was down, video evidence, irrefutable.
Horse manure. It's a game. That's a one bad thing about replay.
Yeah.
All right. That it's just a game. And if you start reversing decisions after games,
yeah.
I don't see it. Get it right. In other words, if they had to take another 10 minutes, maybe take the responsibility away from the referees. Send it to New York like baseball does.
Right.
Let people who, seriously,
Right.
let guys who are outright experts make the call,
Right.
who aren't under the pressure of we got to get it done, we got to do this. I don't know how they missed it.
I don't either. I saw and said the guy was down, and they showed the replay and looked, the guy was down, but they said the guy wasn't down. My take is, if I'm a Miami guy and I look at that and I go, oh, well, that's the way it goes. Is there any pressure? I feel there's some pressure on Miami to have said, wait a second, we didn't actually win the game.
No. It can't happen. It reminds me, if you remember correctly, when Maryland played Notre Dame in soccer for the championship. The first goal, the only goal Maryland scored was by Patrick Mullins. And how did he score it? Do you remember? He used his hand. It hit his hand, and he was ruined the rest of the game.
Mm-hmm.
Should he have said it hit my hand?
Right.
That's what he probably should have done, except for the fact that's not done.
No.
It's the right thing to do, but it's almost like there's a million calls in a game, all right? And every call can affect the outcome.
It sure can.
And, yeah, it was a blown call. But, holy cow, we're going to wind up having 9-hour games.
It's long enough already. And so is our show. I'd like to thank our sponsor, which is Viener Consulting today, for helping put this on. If you have point-of-sale needs, inventory problems, you're looking for a new computer system for your company, call Viener Consulting
Let's give a shout.
251-2900.
Give a shout out to Meyer Consulting.
And Meyer Consulting Engineers, also in Rockville. We thank them for their sponsorship. Their ad was in our postgame show last night. It'll be in the postgame show today after Maryland plays Wisconsin. Watch that on BTN. Kickoff at 3:42 today. Thanks to the Wizard, Bruce Posner. This is Wayne Viener for the TerpTalk Game Day. We'll see you next week.